Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Weather Confessions. I am meteorologist Cody Barnhart, joined here with meteorologist Matthew Euler, and we are working, of course, in association with Spot On Weather LLC. If you haven't given them a check in yet, do so. They do some great work down there with the forecasting in Southeast Virginia. Really good episode on tap tonight for us here. We're talking about tropical season again, Matt, and hurricane season, of course, well underway. But there's a piece of information that most people aren't necessarily aware of. It's called the ACE, not Ace Ventura. It's an actual number. We're going to talk about that tonight here a little bit.
Right. And we're not talking baseball either, as in pitching ace.
Yes.
That's the wrong podcast. You need to go to the sports podcast if that's the case.
Sorry for your ESPN account there, your subscriptions. This is not the right one. Sorry.
Right. We love sports, though. Believe us. We could talk to you about that as well. But instead, we're going to focus in on ACE in tonight's episode. This is the accumulated cyclone energy, and it ties in nicely with the activity throughout the North Atlantic Basin.
Yeah, it's one of those weird numbers, if you will, or, we have all these little verbiages, these little categories. Most people don't even know that they exist. But it's one of those weird things that when you go back through the books and you're looking at the end of the season of tropical storms and hurricanes and what happened or what didn't happen, you look at the ACE values. And this basically correlates with higher above average hurricane seasons and lower. And we're talking a lot already tonight about this ACE thing or, whatever it may be. But what exactly is it? So overall, this is the definition. And we're really going to just kind of highlight or focus rather on the yellow highlighted area. And really, again, what this refers to is the total overall seasonal activity. It's the combined energy and duration between the tropical storms and hurricanes that are occurring. And this is really, we're talking specifically tonight about the Atlantic Basin. Now, every storm out there, Pacific, Indian Ocean, whatever it may be, has its own ACE value. You think about strong storms, those have higher ACE values. Little tiny weak systems out in the middle of nowhere, they don't have much of a number, but all of these numbers, each system, it adds up on this scale by the end of the year. And again, the ACE index, it's based off of a wind energy index for the scale there at the end of the yellow. So this is something, Matt, that we don't talk a lot about publicly, but it's kind of interesting to see how the numbers go. We also have some historic storms that some people may know very much about. We're going to throw some of those ACE value numbers in here tonight as well.
Yeah, this is I remember learning about this for the first time, and this was quite a few years ago, and I had no idea that, this was a great measuring stick of how active the season was, whether it was a higher ACE with much above activity, lower than normal ACE values, lower than normal activity. One other thing we need to keep in mind here is, with the intensity piece in there with the duration, you could actually have, maybe a season where, you're at average for the total number of storms. However, a lot of these storms become major hurricanes, like category 3 or higher, and that could really boost your ACE values up. I believe in 2017, we saw that with Maria. That was quite a powerhouse storm. Of course, Katrina in 95 coming into Louisiana. That was another big one, the Mississippi, Louisiana area. And so it doesn't necessarily, you think about the intensity portion, that's really an important factor in calculating ACE.
Most years you get these numbers that they're right around seasonal average. Maybe they're a little bit above, maybe they're a little bit below. 2026, though, the weather has been wacky. It's been a bipolar weather type of season. We've had drought. We've had major sleetcrete, if you will, back in January and winter. We've had some areas getting deluges of rain week and month after week and month. And these MCSs, these big derecho systems in the Midwest, they've been nonstop the last week and a half. But we're talking about the ACE values here tonight about hurricane season. And two things here on this graph that we really want to take apart or really kind of dissect, if you will. And the first one is that brown dotted line there that you can see running across the, I'd say the bottom right quarter or so of the graph. And that is your 1991. I think you said the 2020. We were talking about this before we got on here. That is your normal or your average ACE value. So how much wind energy all of the storms through each season add up to be throughout the year. And as you see, you go through August and September, peak hurricane season, number gets higher and higher as you would expect. And then it really levels off at the end of the year, the end of hurricane season, of course, the end of November. It's very hard to see, but way down there at the bottom of the graph, you have a green line there through June and July and early parts of August. That's the 2026 number. We are way below where we should be as far as these ACE values go rather. And it's no real secret that we've had a lack of a hurricane season to this point. Nobody's going to complain about that. We're okay not having tropical systems, storms, hurricanes impacting land, people, and property. But excuse me. But the real big number is, again, you are way below average, but it's still early. Like you said, it only takes a couple of storms. We're going to bring that number up quickly.
Yeah, and like you said, the way that curve goes with the ACE on average from the 1991 to 2020 average, it's really getting after, like you said, the time of the year, climatologically favored, more activity as we get into this month, especially late August in the September timeframe.
Right.
That's when the activity really peaks. And so you'll notice too, even at the end there, the November 30th, the end of hurricane season, how you said it levels off. But it's still fairly high there, right? At that time of year, because that's the cumulative total value of ACE at the end of the hurricane season. So yeah, this is exactly what we'd expect. And, it's been so quiet this year. Obviously, we talked about this before because of the very strong El Nino that's really starting to take hold on the weather pattern. And so the Atlantic with increased vertical wind shear, just not getting much activity.
No, it's very much been, I don't want to say so far that it's been a dud year, because we've talked about this ad nauseum over the last couple of months that we expected a below average hurricane season with this budding, very strong El Nino. And the Hurricane Center, Colorado State as well, who also is very well known for putting out forecasts at the beginning of the year, they have all readjusted down their expectations for the remainder of the season, because we have about 2/3 of the season still to go. And we're going to look at those numbers here in just a second. But what we have so far, again, we are almost, pretty much here mid-August. So we are not quite, but we're only about a month or so out from peak hurricane season. Typically about the second, third week of September is when that falls. We've gone through Arthur so far. We've gone through Bertha so far. And Cristobal actually has been out there just for a very short period of time. By the time we actually get this uploaded, will likely be non-existent. Now, we have a couple other tropical waves coming off the African coast, and they're working their way from east to west, rather. The next two names on the list of what will develop from those tropical waves, Dolly and Edward. So one of those two, if not both storms, will likely be coming here, I'd say, in the middle third of the month of August. Then you figure out if you get to Faye, Gonzalo, and Hannah, and our good old friend Isaias. It's fun to say the name now that we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, that Isaias was kind of a headache for us here in Hampton Roads, Eastern North Carolina, up into Hampton Roads. I remember that one well.
Yep.
It was in the summer of 2020, and it was in the month of July, believe it or not. And I remember Jim Cantori being down reporting from the around the Outer Banks area, and it went from like just a depression to a Cat 1 hurricane. And it was like, wow, how did that happen so quickly? But as soon as Jim, when he was doing his on-air stream there, he was so pumped up about it at the end. He was just like, oh, here we go. It's like you knew it was going to be a problem. And sure enough, that night we had nothing but our phones going off, trying to sleep through the night with all the tornado warnings, these quick spin up tornadoes with ICS. It was a pretty busy night.
I was still doing broadcast at that time for my day job. And I remember coming in at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for Isaias specifically. And the tornado warnings went all the way to Charlottesville. They went up toward the Roanoke Valley area as well. And I kept looking, and the Shenandoah Valley was here. Charlottesville's here. Storms are coming in like this. And of course, there's Skyline Drive in the Blue Ridge Mountains that separates from Western Virginia through the remainder of the state. And I kept sitting here thinking, I'm like, oh my God, they're going to come over the mountain. I'm going to have to cut into somebody's news and nobody's awake at 3 a.m. because we were doing around the clock coverage We had a
Uh-huh.
Met, in for like 36 hours straight. And
Mm.
it was luckily I didn't have to do that. All of the
Mm-hmm.
rotating storms stayed off to the east of the Blue Ridge, but I was thinking, man, this is nasty. And then Chris Michaels down in WRAL was just doing wall to wall coverage. God bless him for I think it was like 10 or 11 hours straight. I mean,
Ooh, wow.
it was one after
Mhm.
another, and it just did not stop. So
Yep.
the irony is a storm that continued to spin out literally
Hmm.
hazardous weather across the eastern third of the country was also the same storm nobody could pronounce. So it's kind of like now looking back at things,
Yeah.
it's funny. In the moment, you're like,
Mhm.
what do we do? It's kind of one of those weird, wacky storms. And we're going to, fortunately or unfortunately, Isaias is probably going to come back here in the next month and a half.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I just yeah, it was such an active night. Like I said, those clouds, I would go out as soon as the phone went off, go out, look outside, and those clouds were just racing because of of
Yep.
course, the very strong winds above the surface. Yeah, it was gave us a little bit of rain with it, but thankfully there wasn't a whole lot of damage in this area from the wind.
It was an active storm. It was also a very active period. We had another storm coming right behind Isaias at that point. But the good news is, and we mentioned just a few minutes ago, that the Hurricane Center, as well as Colorado State University, CSU as well, both dropping their expected numbers here for storms for the remainder, the other 2/3 of the season to go. So this is as of August 6th. So this is still very recent. Earlier this month, the new updated Hurricane Center numbers,
Hmm.
and they're talking about a total of 7 to 13 named storms. Now, let's keep in mind we've already had Arthur, Bertha, and Cristobal right out of the gate. So there's three. So let's make that 4 to about 10 named storms. I know it's a little bit of a gap there, but again, that is still a very much below average tropical season in the Atlantic hurricane basin or the Atlantic Ocean basin.
Hmm.
Hurricane wise, we're talking 2 to 6 major hurricanes up to two based on the current and projected ocean forecast temperatures and upper level wind pattern. And you can see it's a 75% chance of being below average, below normal, and a 20% chance of maybe kind of cracking the upper end there of these new numbers. But that little 5% slim above average or above normal chance is hanging on for dear life. I think the even near normal possibilities this year, personally, I would say is on life support because I think even that is going to be a pretty good stretch.
Yes, and just keep in mind here, there's 2 points here I just wanted to make. The average number of named storms per year is 14. The average number of hurricanes is going to be 6. And then the average number of major hurricanes with sustained winds greater than 111 miles per hour, that is 3. So think of 14, 6, and 3 as you compare these numbers from named storms down to major hurricanes. And then the second point I just wanted to make is it only takes one.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
you can't let your guard down, thinking that we're just going to cruise through this hurricane season in the Atlantic and nobody's going to get a landfalling storm or at least have
Yeah.
coastal impact, something grazing the coast. So you still have to have the hurricane plan in place. You still have to have, what you're going to do in that case. Of course, flood insurance, if you're in one of those flood prone zones because of storm surge or, the heavy rains that come on top of the storm surge. So it's very important that you still have a good plan in place. We saw this during, I always think back to the Hurricane Andrew year.
Oh yeah, 92.
That,
Absolutely.
that was a monster storm, and it was during El Nino.
Yep.
And it hit land in 2 places, South Florida as well as into Louisiana on a second landfall, and it could do a lot of destructive damage. So again, let's not let our guard down because the numbers are so low and the ACE is so low, like we just showed you.
It's really going back to the same point we talk about in the springtime as well.
Mm.
Be weather ready. Eye to the sky. People have all kinds of different things. The Weather Service has a severe weather awareness week as well, where each day is a different topic, ranging from flooding and tornadoes and hail and severe wind and all kinds of stuff. But it goes
Mhm.
back to the same point of I live in New York State. I live in northern New England. We don't get severe weather here. Yes, they do every single year. So you
Mhm.
still, even living in Vermont, even living in New Hampshire, upstate New York, you still want to be prepped and ready to go. And to
Yep.
your point as well, it takes 1 or 2 storms People forget a lot of times Andrew hit, everybody thinks Miami-Dade County came across South Florida. They often forget there was that secondary landfall that was over by Louisiana. And it did just as much damage over there as it did over on the southeast coast of Florida. The other problem was you didn't have as much time to evacuate once it was through Florida. Everybody was so sidetracked and looking at what was going on in Florida and, trying to be prepped and ready to go. And it captured so much attention, which did two things here. One was great because it really got people's attention. This is what's coming. We need to get out of here or we're in big trouble. The problem with that was people were also so sidetracked that it took time away from prepping and them getting out of it. So you had kind of a twofold issue there going on. But again, in an El Nino year where you really only had one or two storms here or there of any significance, that was the storm that impacted multiple metros, multiple states, and unfortunately it was deadly. And it's one of the ones we use as a metric. Even though it was back in 92, even though it was before I was born, I wasn't even a thought yet, we use it as a metric because that's exactly what happened. So you still want to be weather aware and have all those emergency kits and the supply kits, have all that ready to go because it's just not worth the risk.
Yeah, just a couple more points before we move on. With Andrew specifically, initially they classified it as a Category 4, and then they reclassified it as a Category 5 down into South Florida. And in addition, we kind of alluded to about, folks that live further up to the north, up towards New England. You're not out of the woods, like you said. And a good example of that would be 1991 Hurricane Bob. What about the 1938 Long Island Express? So, and especially towards the fall, some of these hurricanes can then transition into these mid-latitude storms. And we think about, these mid-latitude powerhouse storms as well, like Sandy. So there's a lot of good points here to be made.
Yeah, and here's the other thing as with that real quick, and I'll close this up before we go on to the next slide because I've got the numbers for CSU as well, how they've also decreased. You talk about Sandy, and that is a prime example. Everybody knows about Sandy. They know about the snow in the Allegheny Front in West Virginia. They know about the timing. It was right along and before Halloween. They know about the wind and the flooding, the New York City subways up and down the eastern seaboard. But the one thing people forget is that hook to the left.
Yeah.
And it is extremely rare to, and even, again, the Long Island Expressway, Bob and 41. You get a lot of these kind of subtropical or these kind of more cold core systems as you work further north toward the Cape Cod area or Martha's Vineyard. But they do the same type of damage. They all have different characteristics up there. But what's the one thing that they have in common? It's the impact on the people that live there in that area. It's the flooding. It's the wind. It's the power outages. It's the schools are closed. You got people evacuating the coast, storm surge. So they all have different characteristics. Some of them have different names. Some are more like a nor'easter. They're not necessarily tropical, but they all cause the same damage.
Yeah.
So there's no one size fits all on this thing.
Right. And then one other final one here I could give an example of is Hurricane Grace.
Oh, yeah.
With the perfect storm, the book and the movie, where Grace collided with that mid-latitude energy and just became one massive storm. And it was so greatly impacted the New England coastline specifically.
Yeah, that's a great one. And also, if anybody's not seen The Perfect Storm, whether it's the movie, which is incredible,
it is,
or read the book, do one or the other at the very least. I mean, it's one of the most underrated movies out there. And I'm not saying that because it's a weather-related thing. I mean, the production, truly, and the music, like the whole 9 yards is really that good. Certainly do yourself a favor and take a gander. It's a great, great movie.
Yeah, I used to get teased a lot from the line in that movie in The Perfect Storm where I said, you could be a meteorologist your whole life and nothing like this would ever happen. He was like really dramatic, the actor that was playing the meteorologist. Like people were joking around with me after that. Like you probably start saying this stuff too if you saw these kind of things coming together. And obviously not in a good way for the population, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, it's still a relevant point, of course.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so we're going to move on. So we just did the Hurricane Center. The numbers have come down. Let's do this
Mhm.
CSU as well. We've got those numbers for everybody as once again. And there you go, Colorado State. So average numbers, like you said, Matt, there 14.4 named storms on the right side. So we average 14 a year over the 30-year average. They are now forecasting. And again, this was produced one day prior to the updated Hurricane Center numbers. So this was August 5th. NHC released their new numbers on August 6th. CSU is going with 9 named storms now. Hurricanes, only 4. Major hurricanes, just 1.
Mhm.
And here's the interesting thing: accumulated cyclone index, ACE, the ACE thing that we started this podcast talking about, and we're going to go further in depth here in just a second, only 50. That is a very low number. A lot of years you can be between 100 and 200. Some years, the really big years, you're talking 2 to 300. Again, we're going to go over some specific numbers and years here in just a little bit, but a number of 50, that's, Matt, that's pretty low. It's a pretty inactive season as a whole.
Yeah, I misspoke on that too. Let me correct myself on the number of hurricanes on average. It's 7. I think I had said 6 on the previous slide. So it's 14, 7, and 3 as far as named storms, number of hurricanes on average, and then the major hurricanes is 3. Yeah.
Right. And here's the thing too, is look at the average ACE. I'm going to come back to this for a second because we're talking tonight about the ACE component with hurricane season. Average on the right is 123. So we are not quite a third, a little bit more, but you're, less than half.
Yeah.
50 is what they're expecting now compared to the average of 123. And the numbers that we have so far are very, very low. A bit of a smaller graph here, again, from CSU. Far right side of the screen, we have Tropical Storm Arthur, Tropical Storm Bertha as well, 0.4 and 2.2 respectively. That's what they each produce. So we have an ACE value, a total energy, a wind energy index value of 2.6 when you add those two together, and we're a month away from peak hurricane season. That doesn't seem like a whole lot here, talking about 2.6, and we have what,
Mhm.
4 weeks until peak season? It's
Yeah.
not much there.
Right around September 10th, right?
Right.
Is the peak climatological date of activity. Yeah, I mean, we're within that month. So yeah, that's extremely low to this point. But some seasons have started off pretty slow with the lower ACE, and they
Mhm.
really did pick it up in the peak time. So we'll see what
Right.
the future holds here in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
It turns fast.
Hmm.
And here's the other thing too, is the ocean temperatures. I know it's still very warm out there. It's August, it's back to school. You walk outside and it's beach weather some days, almost every day, depending on where you're located. But
Hmm.
the ocean temperatures are actually still warming because water takes so long to warm after, months and months of cold weather, cold temperatures in the wintertime, early spring. So we haven't hit peak temperatures in the ocean yet. That won't occur until, again, next month into September, and then it's a very slow decline. That's why hurricane season lasts all the way through November as well. But
Hmm.
we're also talking about the peak time of the year when it comes to tropical storms and when it also comes to hurricanes as well. And look at the frequency. Again, as a whole, we're talking about the highest green bar there for tropical storms is September. Same idea. It's a lower number compared to the tropical storms, but the peak hurricane numbers as well there
Hmm.
into September. And August and October are very, very similar. So I know people think October, you're thinking pumpkin spice, you're thinking about fall and coziness. But from a tropical standpoint, those ocean temperatures are still awfully warm. If you've gone to the beach 2 weeks after Labor Day when the kids are back in school, hotels are cheaper and it's a lot less crowded, and you've gotten into the water, you probably would be first thing you tell everybody is say, get in the water. It's absolutely gorgeous. Same idea here. And that's why that frequency of storms, we have a long ways to go with the rest of August, September, October, and it can still happen in November to bring up those ACE values for the season.
Yeah, and again, just for the safety from the safety standpoint, it doesn't even take a hurricane to have major impacts on coastal areas. It could be a slow moving, stalled out type of tropical storm that just produces record rainfall in an area.
Yep.
So it doesn't take a hurricane either here. So you notice how that green bar really peaks up there just above the 4 value in September. Just keep that in mind, that anything with tropical characteristics can produce a lot of life-threatening flooding, and it could be some major impacts.
We talk a lot about, and I even go back to Ike, right? When Ike slammed into, or I'm sorry, Harvey, when Harvey slammed into Texas,
Yep.
that, was the thing. But for how long was that a tropical storm spinning along the coastline of Texas? And it
Mhm.
was just dumping and dumping and dumping, and
Yes.
also causing the storm surge, causing the wind damage. So again, it was a quote unquote tropical storm. Shouldn't be that big of a deal, but it was a deadly disaster for the western part of the Gulf, parts of Southwest Louisiana, a good chunk of Texas, unfortunately. So another example of the quote unquote, it's just a tropical storm, is a very bad mindset, and one that I will argue until the day I die that needs to be taken out of our memory and gotten rid of from that. Um, Talking about tropical storms, talking about hurricanes, regardless of what the system is, we're talking about these ACE values, but compared to average, uh, you know, when we start talking about this, looking at the left side there, you start talking about 15 close to, or I'm sorry, you start talking about some of the named storms, rather. Matt, you were talking about that earlier. And with some of these ACE values, there's your ranges and some of your numbers as far as range of hurricanes, range of major hurricanes. When you start talking about above average, near average, and a below average season, that's where you're going to get your big ACE numbers. We talked earlier, like 2 to 300, and even sometimes the 150 to 200 range on the ACE value. Those are your big above average seasons. The type of years that we're seeing here, again, coming back to the yes, be ready, prepped from the safety side, we're seeing the below average. And you see where some of those lower numbers are. They are very similar to what the new NHC numbers are for the remainder of the season, the expectations, and also what CSU has.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and it's really interesting when we look at just the overall picture in the tropics each year. I want to mention that each one of these storms with these various ACE values, they really all have their own personality, like personality traits. Some are really big into the flooding, some more so into the storm surge with some of the higher tides in certain areas. Some produce these short spin up tornadoes that do a lot of damage as well.
Absolutely.
So, there's characteristics of these tropical systems with the various ACE values attached to them, but they all have their own unique personalities.
They remind you of a bad cartoon, and everybody wants to be the main character.
Uh-huh.
It's all like me, 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 me. It's like, I want to be the thing. And every one of these storms says, I want to cause the tornadoes. I want to flood out the towns. I want to cause the wind damage. And it's like, everybody wants to be first, but you only need one, and you don't need anybody else, but they keep fighting over, the number one spot. And that's kind of what we're looking at. That's what we're often dealing with here. These storms they're fierce. They're not necessarily huge, but they're fierce.
Just think about this. Think about that crazy uncle at the holiday party, versus the calm aunt. This is the difference in like characteristics of people, but each of these storms has similar type of, obviously not a crazy uncle, but the traits with the various features of the dangers associated with them.
The traits and the number of margaritas probably have a very similar component.
Yep, there you go.
Oh boy. Oh, it has been a long, long week. Anybody else knows probably what we're talking about. All right, so let's talk about some of these ACE values here as we go throughout the top 10 that we've had. Mentioned between 2 and 300. Again, those are some big numbers because remember, some of these small little tropical storms or little tropical depression, they don't really bring a lot of value. So you're really relying, if you have 30 storms for a season, let's say 5 or 6 they don't bring you much of anything or very small numbers, all of a sudden you're really talking about needing an entire season's worth of ACE. Again, that's accumulated cyclone energy within the remaining 23 or 24 storms. So it's a very interesting index, but look at these numbers. Number one year, 1933, way back when, 20 storms. And then what really is impressive, you look at some of these other years, Number two in '05, of course, we all know what happened in '05, 28 storms, but you still had less ACE in '05 over 20 or over 1933, but you had eight more storms. That tells you how impressive 1933 was as a season. But look at number three, 1893. You had a 231 ACE value with only 12 storms. Same idea, 1926. You can go on and on. But again, the idea is, Matt, you're talking about average-ish numbers, 14, 15. You have some 12s in there, but you don't have, other than, let's say, '05, they're ranked number two with the 1, 2, and we'll even call it number five. They're back in 1995. You had 19 storms. These are pretty consistent. Call it, 11 to 16 or so storms, 17 storms. They're not these crazy above average years as far as the number of storms, but it's a lot of strong storms out there that we saw over the course of several seasons. And a lot of years there, the top 8 years, well over 200 ACE.
Yeah, and look at this distribution by the years of the higher ACE values. I mean, you're talking in this top 10 list, you're looking at 5 years since 1998, or actually since 1995. We've had 5 of the highest 10 ACE value seasons. So that's interesting. That's an interesting trend as of late. And yeah, I mean, the '05, you made the point about it. It just, you think about the ACE value there and the fact you had 28 storms versus 20 in 1933. That, again, it goes to show you that you have to look not only at intensity of storms, but also the duration of the storms. Where, '05, they just kept popping up every which way you looked. And at one time, I think we had like 4 or 5 storms active across the Atlantic Basin at '05.
Yeah.
But not all of them live longer life. Some only live a couple days and they get sheared apart. Some pass over cooler water with, when you get the upwelling from other storms that pass over those areas.
Right.
So that cooler water destroys them a little bit. So yeah, it's impressive to look at that chart and just see how high those values are.
There's all these variables with weather, and that's the one thing that I love with the weather is, again, besides the fact that anybody walks outside and it impacts every single person every single day, every single piece of weather, every storm setup, every season, it's different. There is nothing ever close to being the same. There's nothing that will ever be the same. It is literally just something different, but you got to find the numbers, the puzzles, the trends, call it what you want, but you got to put the pieces together. And it's pretty cool because there's just nothing that's going to be the same.
Yeah, it's almost like playing weather detective, right? You're trying to examine all the factors that may have contributed to a higher ACE season versus a lower ACE season. What was going on with El Nino, La Nina cycles? That's an example. What about the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation? That's another teleconnection where you get warmer than normal waters across the North Atlantic. That generally tends to lead to more active North Atlantic hurricane seasons as well. So looking at those trends and kind of identifying, kind of going back and trying to put those puzzle pieces together is important.
Now I realize why I liked puzzles when I was a kid. 25, 30 years down the road, it all makes sense. In the moment, I had no clue. It was just 2 a.m. I was putting puzzle pieces together. I had no idea, but now it all makes a lot more sense as well. But we just talked about some of the busier seasons. And again, there's a couple of the top 5s as well. Want to focus with this graphic on the other end of the spectrum, the quietest top 5. And there's a few things, Matt, that we need to talk about and kind of stop on this graphic. First and foremost, so CSU is talking about an ACE for this season of 50. And if we just look at the quietest numbers from the ACE values, you get 36, 40, 52, 62. 50 was right in line with those numbers. The other thing, and I'm going to let you kind of take it from here for a second, look at the years, 2013. So what follows 13 is the winter of 13-14, 97, the winter of 97-98, 09 and 10. Many of us remember that. 15-16, we remember that. 14-15, can't forget that. Matt, we got a trend going here, or what are we talking about?
Yeah, so if you look at those years, there's a lot of those years that were actually the lower ACE seasons were actually El Nino years. You see on the graphic here for quietest, 97, that was leading up to that 97-98 El Nino winter. It was a very strong El Nino that winter. 2009-10 was another moderate to strong El Nino. 2015, very strong El Nino that following winter. But you could literally see, is there a connection between busier versus quieter ACE seasons? I do believe so, but then again, just trying to go back and look at the busiest and quietest years and trying to correlate what I really believe is, with the energy in the atmosphere, when you have a lot of potential energy out there because you have a quieter than normal ACE hurricane season. I believe there's a lot more energy for extratropical storms, those nor'easters in the winter seasons to follow these quieter ACE years. I believe there's a lot more that these storms can tap into. So maybe there's a connection there between quieter ACE seasons in the hurricane time of year and then the following winters with the number of nor'easters. It makes sense to me. And if you go back to the years one more time, we looked at 13 was on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also 14, right? And what happened those years in the overall jet stream pattern in the winter? You had this huge upper level ridge parked over the western portions of North America and a deep trough over the east. And it was a pretty persistent winter pattern. We all know what happened at 09-10, and we already discussed that in the previous podcast. So, what's the connection here? Like you said, it's a puzzle piece. It's trying to figure out these patterns. And I absolutely love that part of it, is trying to figure out, hey, what happened with the ACE and what happened the following winter season. Not all cases positively correlated between the busiest and quietest ACE seasons in the following winters, which then begs the question is, we have a big, huge ocean basin. So maybe it's really quiet and you have low ACE in the Atlantic basin, but maybe in the Eastern Pacific, you have a much busier ACE, or in the Western Pacific with typhoon season, it's much higher ACE. So it's a very large global picture here. It's all connected. You can't just isolate one box and say that's end all be all when you look at this. And also over time, how does this energy, either void or excess energy, how does that balance out over time? We all know that storms and hurricanes are created to redistribute the excess heat from the equator and move it towards the poles. And so I just think it's an interesting topic.
No, it's 100% interesting. And what really fascinates me as well is we've got this super El Nino budding up right now, basically. You can call it what you want. That's what it is. We've passed the strong. We're past very strong. And it's basically, that's what it is. It's a super strong El Nino. But that doesn't mean we had a super strong El Nino for each of those 4 or 5 years that you just went over as well. They were all strong or very strong, something in that capacity there. But again, we talk about each year is different. Looking at 13, 14 in the winter, 97, 98. Again, like Matt said, our last podcast episode, we talked about the winter of 09-10. That year, 15, 16, and 14, 15. Many years in there are El Ninos, but they were similar setups, but they still had some minor differences that caused big impacts, at least for some parts of the country. So going back to the point of, again, hurricane season, winter setups from the big ridge of the west with the jet stream to the big troughs and shots of Arctic and cold air in the east. Similar setups, similar winters. Was the whole entire thing the same? No, it was not. So here we are back again to that kind of pattern where you're picking out pieces. You're trying to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense and why, really across the board.
Yeah, I just one more thing here to add on this. I just thought about this while looking at this. So if you look at the quietest ACE Atlantic hurricane season years, 3 of the 5 following winters were colder than average with general troughing in the eastern U.S. 97, 2015 were the exceptions. So that's when, you had the very strong El Ninos, and it was a fairly mild winter across much of the United States.
Correct.
So, you go 3 out of 5 here, going back to 97, from quietest to a more of a ridge out west and a trough in the east. And it's just what happened. So I find that interesting. It's over half. It's over 50% of those following winters.
And there's definitely a trend there. And again, when we talk about seasonal forecasting, this is exactly something that's going into our seasonal forecast when we start building them. Believe it or not, in the next month and a half, we'll start digging out some numbers for winter. A month and a half. That's ridiculous. Holy cow.
I know it. Time's flying.
I
Yep.
should have somebody call and say to prep the plows, get them ready to go right away. It's not going to be all that long.
No, I would probably say let's just release the snow hounds.
Yep.
Yeah.
So absolutely sold. All
Yep.
righty, we've got one more thing real quick to wrap up here as far as
Mhm.
the ace values to go, and we talked a lot tonight about the patterns, about puzzles, pieces that are similar, but they're not all the same. But there is one thing that's the same, at least for the list that we have in front of us, and these are the top three highest tropical cyclone. Now, again, tropical storm, hurricanes, doesn't matter what level, tropical cyclone ace values in the North Atlantic Ocean specifically. Strongest specific one single storm, '04 Ivan, had an ACE value of 70.4. Number two, coming in with Irma. Matt, you mentioned 2017, beginning of the episode here, had a 64.9 value. And '03, of course, Isabel, that anniversary, again, a couple years ago, the 20-year anniversary. We're now, was 23 years, believe it or not, 63.3. So these are huge numbers, of course, being numbers 1, 2, and 3 on the all-time list for the Atlantic Basin. But there's a component with this, Matt, that they're all the same.
Yeah.
And I think you have the answer to why that may be.
Yeah, just the fact that they're all ice storms for some reason. But if we were to go to look at the past historical data for the hurricane tracks for these specific storms, I'd be curious to look at how long of a track these had across the Atlantic, and then what the peak intensity was for each of these. I believe Maria I mentioned earlier in the video too, by the way, but maybe I'm off on that one because
I think you did mention that one earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought Maria was quite an intense one down in the Caribbean, but yeah, this is very interesting. I mean, just think about this. Like, again, it doesn't necessarily equate to the number of storms, like that chart we showed earlier, where you had 1933 versus 2015,
Right.
and 2015 had the 28 storms versus 20, I think, in 1933. And this goes to show you here that, one storm can really bring the ACE values up for a particular hurricane season.
You talk about years where you're 120, 150 ACE
Mhm.
values. So let's just take, for an example, take the number one storm here. Okay. Hurricane
Mhm.
Ivan, 2004, an
Mhm.
ACE value of 70.4. So let's make 70 a round number. If you're talking an ACE of 150, again, round numbers here for the season of 2004, 70 of 150 is essentially half of your ACE value in a single storm.
That's right.
So it doesn't take a lot here. You add two or three of those very strong storms, and those ACE values, they're going to come up, and they're going to come up through the roof. Again, very quickly. That may not look like it, but it's like doing a stair climber at the gym. It looks pretty good, feels pretty good, and then you hit the wall, and it comes fast at the end.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Very good points there for sure. Yeah. I find this interesting, and it's kind of eerie how it's all ice storms for
Yeah.
the top three.
Well,
That's
the other thing too is we got to remember with the ice storms, when do they typically form?
later in the year.
Right. So
Yeah.
we're talking September.
Yep.
And that's right when the ocean temperatures are also at their peak. So thinking about the alphabet, thinking about the time of year, thinking about how that correlates to peak water temperatures,
Hmm.
it makes sense. But it's just kind of interesting that, like you said, 1, 2, and 3, they're all ice storms. But there is a rhyme and reason to the science, as we're seeing.
Hmm. Yeah, I would say for the Hampton Roads area, Isabel, that one was one of the worst case scenarios, because the Isabel track went right into eastern North Carolina. It almost went like at a 90-degree angle, slightly less than that, of course. But
Right.
and Hampton Roads was located on the eastern semicircle of that storm, with the strong southeast winds and easterly winds, and it pushed all the water into Hampton Roads areas on top of the high tides.
Yeah.
And I believe it was one of the top three here in this area where you had the highest storm created tides ever. It was over 7 feet above normal with Isabel in the area. So there was tons of flooding here. Yeah, that was just a terrible storm in the area, because it just the way the trajectory of it going into the eastern North Carolina coast. A lot of times they'll kind of parallel the Carolinas and follow the Gulf Stream, that warm ocean current, and go out. But in this case, I mean, a V line straight into North Carolina. I mean, eastern North, it was bad here.
It's funny. Funny is not the right. It's interesting. Funny is definitely not the right word. It's interesting that we're talking about Isabel tonight. As you know, the last 3 days for work, I've been doing a lot of floodplain training, and I've been down in Frederick. So we've got people from Baltimore, D.C., and throughout the Mid-Atlantic and FEMA. One of the guys that works for FEMA actually lives on a boat, and he lives down toward Annapolis. So he lives on a boat in the marina. So he, is on the water, goes back and forth. He also lived down there as well when Isabel came through.
Yeah.
And he said the islands down there, because remember, the eastern shore of Maryland, southern Maryland, you down towards, say, Salisbury and even toward Annapolis and over toward like Ocean City, all that area, you've got these areas that water just inundates, whether it's from the Chesapeake Bay or from the Atlantic or all these little tributes that, work their way out, these little tributaries. So the water came in with the storm surge, and he said there was a boat, a large yacht that was there in the marina that for whatever the reason, I guess, was not properly tied up or not tied up at all. This boat, because of the wind and the storm surge rolling and rolling, shoved this yacht into the power lines and the power poles that were 3 stories high. Wow. And as we've seen with tropical systems, things wherever the water level is, they don't come down until the water comes down. So things are kind of just sort of floating there, whether that's a day or 2 or 7 or 8 days, until that water level drops down and the flood recedes. Debris, boats, cars. It's like a tornado, right? You have all the piles of things that shouldn't be there. This boat basically sat there and whiplashed the power lines and the poles for a couple of days. And a lot of the region down there lost power, not because of the storm specifically itself, but because this boat was shoved into these power lines because of the wave action being so high. So, I was just thinking about that today. We were talking about that when I was doing this floodplain training. And, we talked about Isabel and the impacts down there in Hampton Roads and that Virginia Beach area, but also right up the coastline to Ocean City. And like I said, Salisbury and Annapolis, and going into the Chesapeake to Baltimore, up and down the eastern seaboard. We all felt some part of it, minor or major. Everybody was impacted somehow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, with a hurricane in general, the center of it is like a giant, like soda straw. So when you go to drink through a straw, of course, you're causing that
it's like that suction.
Yeah, that suction force. And so that very low pressure as you're sucking through the straw, it pulls all the liquid through it. But all around that, with a hurricane specifically, you have just this huge mounds of water that build up due to that drastic pressure difference and how low that pressure is at the center. So, yeah, really interesting.
It's amazing. It's not something you want to live through. This is not necessarily this sounds cool. Let me go stand out on the beach and do what Cantori does. Nope. Put an X through that one. We're not advertising that, and that is the wrong thing to do.
Right.
We just want to make that very
safety is the most important thing. Yep.
You can replace everything else. I can replace everything in this room. I can't replace myself tomorrow morning when the sun comes up.
Nope.
Safety is number 1. So, alrighty, guys. Well, that's going to wind down, I think, here a little bit for our most up-to-date episode. This is episode number 10 or number 9. I'm sorry. Wow, I'm trying to get ahead of myself. Matt, stop me. How do you count to 10? I don't know. But this is episode number 9 as we wrap this thing up. Again, we will have another one coming up here very soon. We have some more guests coming up in line. We have a weather and health episode coming up very soon that I know a lot of you are very eager and excited. We've been getting questions about that. I have specifically gotten messages about that now for like 6 months. So, I'm very excited to get that pushed out. And we've got some other really good ones here coming up once again as well. And then, of course, fall is not that far off. We'll have some more fall-specific interesting things, whether it's with some more guests on. This time of year, it's kind of hard. People are on vacation. Things are busy. Kids are getting ready to go back to school. It's a little trickier to get some people on. We've got some really good ones lined up for everybody coming down the pipeline. Matt, I think we're very excited about those.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was just talking to a potential guest this past week that's available on the 9th of September. So he'll be joining us. He's very excited to jump on and share his experiences from the football perspective. Of course, football season will be kicking off by that point. So it's perfect timing for that guest on the podcast on September 9th. So mark your calendars. And then hopefully later in the fall, we'll get some additional interesting guests as well, especially we talk about foliage, the fall foliage. Some of you plan the trips to go check that out. And so, yeah, I know you're a big, I know that
right now.
that's definitely you for sure. Like you love to do that out there in the trails,
Every year.
colors. I mean, just amazing photos too, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Appreciate it. And I'll tell you what, you're talking about foliage real quick. I am working with a guy who does a lot of chasing throughout the mid-Atlantic, but does some ridiculous fall foliage trips photography as well to get him on here as well for the fall. So I'm not going to put any names out there, but in the process of getting another really good one. So we've got a lot of people coming up the pipeline as well as we get closer and closer to pumpkin spice season. I actually look forward to is it pumpkin spice? Is it the apple cider debate every October?
Yeah.
And there's no wrong answer.
No, there
No
isn't.
wrong answer.
Either way, it's, and they keep bringing these drinks out even earlier and earlier every year. So
yeah. Now don't get me started on that. We'll be here another hour.
Yeah, right. So I guess we should probably wrap it up.
That's true. Yeah, before pumpkin spice season's here and we're still alive at this point, we'll be in big trouble.
That's right.
All righty. Well, this has been episode 9, guys, of Weather Confessions. Again, in association with Spot On Weather LLC. Again, if you haven't given them and Matt a look yet, give them a shout out and take a look at what they do. He's got some unbelievable work down there. Great website as well. But that is going to do it for episode 9. Episode 10 will be coming soon again with another guest. So very excited for that. But until then, everybody stay safe, stay out of the tropics, and enjoy what's left of summer because there's not a lot of that time frame remaining.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. Have a great one wherever you are.